Can you see this board?
Yes.
Anybody need some water or anything?
No, I'm good.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. We're still in the middle of Dhul Hijjah, which is the first 10 days of the last Islamic calendar. So we want to remember that every worship that we do, every supplication to Allah is seen as the best actions during this 10 days. And so we want to worship Allah more, to give more in charity, to think about Allah Azza wa Jal more, to try to eat right, try to fast during these days if we are able to. And inshallah on the Eid, then we can break that fast and celebrate the willingness of the sacrifice of Ibrahim, and also the willingness of the sacrifice of Ismail. I was talking to a sister this morning at Fajr, and she said that one thing needed to be emphasized when we were talking about the willingness of the sacrifice of Ibrahim. She said that she was listening to a khutbah, and the Imam kept mentioning the slaughter of Ismail. He said it 3 or 4 or 5 times, and she cringed a bit every time that he said it. And I told her that the meaning and the understanding and the reasoning for this dream was to abolish sacrifice, human sacrifice. So that at that time, human sacrifices was going on. People would sacrifice their sons, their daughters, the most holy person or the most pure person, to show their level of devotion to God. And that this dream of Ibrahim and Ismail was most effective because they were willing to do the sacrifice. But the entire sacrifice was to show that Allah does not need or want your sacrifices. He doesn't need your blood. He doesn't need someone to be killed in order for you to be redeemed. Interestingly enough, when you are in studies of comparative religion, you'll find in the book of Hebrews that the parallel is drawn between Abraham and his son. They have Isaac as his sacrificial son, and we know that it is Ismail. But in the book of Hebrews, it mentions the parallel between Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his one and only son, as they say Isaac, and God sacrificing his son Jesus. Now, if you draw the parallel to the conclusion, you find that he was not crucified, right? In the same way that Abraham did not actually sacrifice his son. So the parallel is drawn, but it's not drawn to the ultimate conclusion. The book of Hebrews is generally attributed to the Apostle Paul, but scholars today don't know exactly who wrote that book. But whoever wrote the book was trying to draw the parallel between those two. But the parallel still is that God doesn't need a sacrifice, because neither of them were actually sacrificed. And what this shows is that Abraham was willing to, and Ismail in this story was also willing to be sacrificed. But then Allah demonstrated through them that he doesn't need sacrifice. And repeatedly in the Bible even it says, I don't need your sacrifice. I want your willingness to come to me, to turn and change from your ways. I don't need blood. I don't need any of those things. So people don't need to be harmed in order for God to forgive you, including yourself. There are some people, including Muslims, they beat themselves, they scar themselves to show shame or to show that they are repentful for the things that they have done, when none of that is required in this deen. Allah doesn't need your blood. He wants your willingness to turn and repent to him. And that's all that is necessary for Allah to forgive you. So since she mentioned that, I thought it was something that I wanted just to express before we started this Talim. And there's a couple other things that I wanted to mention as well. Just a reminder that we'll have the Eid prayer on Wednesday. They'll have two prayers. One of them will be at 7:30, and the other one will be at 9 o'clock, and it'll be in Hampton at the Hampton Convention Center, and it'll be with the larger community.
Is it Virginia Beach or one at the?
I'm not for certain.
Yeah, at the end of the interstate.
Where they had the Eid al-Fitr? Is it be in the same place at the sports
No,
place?
not the sports place. All the way down at the the Provision.
The pavilion.
Yeah,
I know you're talking about.
Yeah.
I
I
have.
think it's same time.
Right, it's at the same time. I haven't been privy to any of that information. What happened is we had the Janaza committee meeting on last Sunday, and Saeed Ismail, who is integral part of the PIC community. And the PIC is Peninsula Islamic Cultural Center or something like that. That's a church that was converted into an Islamic center off of Todd Lane. And he said that he was going to send us an invitation to pray with them. Now, obviously, people can pray, wherever they're going. All the Eid, the purpose of the Eid is for us to congregate together with as many Muslims as possible. So since he sent that invitation, as I said, I sent it out to the board members, and we agreed that most of us will go there. But obviously, you can go to whichever one is closest to you, whichever one is convenient for you, because I know going over the water is not people's favorite thing to do. But I also want to introduce myself to the imam over at PIC Center. He's an African-American brother, and I wanted to at least build some rapport with him. I've heard and I've actually followed him a bit on social media. He gives a great good khutbah, and he does halaqas there, and I just wanted to introduce myself to him as well, so that I figured that would be a great opportunity to do so. So this is the greater Eid. It's supposed to be, and is actually, larger than the other Eid because it's more important. It's the Eid of sacrifice. The other one seems larger to us because we've been fasting for a month and then you get to eat. So that always affects you in a different way. But we should remember that this is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said this is the greater Eid. This is the most important Eid that we should be observing. So next year, inshallah, we should be in a better position, a better place, so we can focus more on Eid al-Adha. Inshallah, we'll be able to have animals. I know the brother that we generally reach out to, apparently he didn't have any animals that's relatively close to us, but it's up to me to do planning a little bit further out so we can be more prepared for it. But we also didn't really have the funds that we wanted to because we're trying to purchase the building next door. So inshallah, we'll be more equipped to get what we want to do next year. So we're going to do this this year. We'll be praying with the larger community and then coming back here and giving away food instead of cutting the meats. Unless someone can individually do that, obviously they're able to do that. But that's what we're planning for this Eid on Wednesday, inshallah. The other thing I wanted to mention is yesterday so I'm a part of the One Ummah Dawah project. And we met in Richmond on yesterday, a couple of the brothers. If you all recall from a month and a half, maybe 2 months ago, we had a meeting here with some council members, and we were talking about our initiative towards children in schools getting days off for the Eids and our religious holidays. And at the moment, it's still we're still trying to get some support from some politicians. Actually, both of the politicians that came here, or two of them, were not elected. But one of them is going to stay on the council member board, which is probably where she's most effective, we're most needed for us, instead of going into the Senate. And the other sister is in planning, so we still have we still have an ability to reach out to them in the field that they are in currently. But they were not elected for the positions that they were aspiring to get. But the other part of that was the Umrah, and it is tentatively, I ain't gonna say tentatively, it's set for the springtime. I have a flyer that I'm gonna print out because we just had a meeting yesterday. It's not given a specific date in the spring that the Umrah will be, but I wanted the community to know this, and I'll just reiterate it on Juma so everybody will be aware of it. It's actually flying out of DC, which is great. Instead of flying to New York or driving to New York, we can just drive to DC, probably carpool or what have you. However many people that are willing to make that trip, but it's not. The date has not been cemented yet. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of insight into that, and it looks like spring is going to be the date that we agreed upon. I know some people were thinking about going during the winter time, and actually I think Imam Ali Salam is going to go twice next year, so I'll let him know about the tentative date and see if he'll be able to go in the winter and in the spring, because I really wanted a larger group if we can to go. I know some people were scheduled to go to Hajj and weren't able to make it, so that those funds were returned back to them. And for the price that they were going on Hajj, they would be able to cover the price for the Umrah. And I also wanted to make it, we wanted to make it far out enough so people could save for that money. It is priced at $3,250. It would be 4 people to a room. So it'd be 4 brothers in the room, 4 sisters in the room for that $3,250. It is 4 days and 3 nights. I believe it's 4 days in Medina and 3 days in Mecca. And it is in the 5-star hotels. It's right in front of the Prophet's Mosque in Medina and right in front of the Haram in Mecca. So you will just come down the stairs and go right into the Prophet's Mosque. Some pricing for other packages are a little bit less expensive. That's because they're further away from the Prophet's Mosque and from the Haram where the Kaaba is, and people have to catch cabs or walk. So it's much more accommodating for this $3,250. And when I went, both times that I went recently, I was right there at it, and there's nothing like being able to wake up and then walk right over to the Prophet's Mosque and walking to the Kaaba. One other thing that was mentioned in the One Dawah project was, so there are initiatives that people bring up that we want to try to focus on. This one thing that was brought up was lead in the pipes, in the water pipes. People know about lead paint, obviously, and houses that were built in the early 1980s had lead paint in them. But now there's also discussion about if I can remember correctly, 1986. Any house built by at 1986 or later have lead pipes in them, and the lead is getting into the water. In Richmond, they already have some legislation to change those pipes, but they're not really telling the public because it's pretty expensive to do that, the piping outside. So there is an initiative to let people know and try to help facilitate that, because the lead is obviously for people who are not even Muslims. They're drinking water that has lead in it, they're bathing in it, they're cooking in it. And for Muslims, we make wudu 5 times a day, not along with washing and all those things. So the brother asked me and a couple other brothers from Norfolk, what is the level of lead that's in your water? And I didn't have an idea. I don't know what that is or how severe the problem is here. But that was an issue that was brought up, and maybe something that we can initiative that we can focus on. Because what they also do is what One Ummah Dawah has done in recently was build wells in Africa. So his initiative was, if we're getting water for them there, maybe we should make sure our water is clean here. Take care of your home first. And then another brother was like, well, I like doing that. We can do both. We can tie shoes and chew bubble gum. So we know it's an issue enrichment. I'm sure it's an issue here. So that's one of the other things that we were focusing on. So I just want to let you all know about that. And then what I want to talk about today was something, a surah that we've all heard repeatedly, but it's important, and I want to make sure, since we've been doing these last couple of weeks, we've been using more or delving more into the Arabic so that we can be familiar with words and phrases and what Allah is saying in the Quran. This is the speech of Allah. This is Dhul Hijjah. So this is the first 10 days. So anything that we do that is pertaining to the Quran is also going to be multiplied, not simply because it's Dhul Hijjah. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, any good deeds done during this time are the best deeds done during these 10 days. But also Allah or the Prophet tells us that any letter, harf, any letter that is recited during any time of the year is multiplied by 10. Your blessing is multiplied by 10. So when you hear at the beginning of Al-Baqarah, the second surah, and you say Alif, Lam, Mim, just saying Alif, Lam, and Mim, you get 30 blessings for each of those letters, not just the word. So if you say, for example, we know Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim is in the Quran at least 114 times. So just saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, not for each word, each letter. So the Ba, the Sin, the Mim, the Aleph, the Lam, the Ha, all of those letters, each letter that you say, you get a blessing. So I always like to reiterate this because Allah is giving us so many opportunities to be blessed, to be redeemed from anything that bad that we have done. You get multiplied blessing times 10 for each letter. So this is, to me, it's much more much more your responsibility is on you because you are able to say these words. So for example, we're talking about the sacrifice. If the sacrifice was for Ismail, you kill him and then you are blessed, right? He is the person that's really doing the deed. It's really his sacrifice. But in the actions that you have to do, it's on you. You have the responsibility. You have the accountability is the word I was trying to think of. So if Allah said, well, listen, I gave you a blessing times 10 for every letter that you say. How many letters did you say? You say none, then it's on you, right? If you can, all of us can say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, right? All of us can say the name of Allah. If you don't know how to say Allahu Akbar, but we've heard it enough so we can say Allahu Akbar. If we say Allahu Akbar over and over again, each of those letters, you get times 10 blessings for no matter what day of the week it is. Now it's the first 10 days, you get even more blessings for it being the first 10 days. So that's the reason why it's important to try to learn as much as you can and say whatever you can. I know a brother, hopefully he's listening. His birthday was actually yesterday. He said he became, singing.
It's on.
Oh, it's fine. What happens is it's in saving mode. As soon as I touch it, it'll come back on.
Okay.
Just to make sure. Yeah, it's there. He said he's sometimes a little apprehensive when he comes to the masjid because people are saying words and he don't know what they're saying. You know, he just became Muslim. So if we say anything aside from Assalamu alaikum, he's like, you say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. He's like, all right, Assalamu alaikum. How you doing? I told him to just ask people, because all of us started at one point or one level, and the only way you can grow is by coming to the masjid, asking questions, and the more you learn, the more you're around, the more you know. And then you find out also, the reason I want to do this also is because a lot of things you know already, you just think you might not know. You know what I mean? Like once you put them together, you find out, I do have some knowledge on this subject. So this is 3 lines. I wasn't able to write the 4th line. I'm going to write it on there once we get to it. It is 4 lines of 4 ayats. First, this is from Suratul Ikhlas. We all heard this surah before. It starts, well, first, Allah tells us in the Quran to say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. So we say we seek refuge with Allah from Shaitan the accursed before we recite the verses of this, any verse of the Quran. So you seek refuge with Allah from the Shaitan the accursed first. And then you say, this is Surah, I wrote this down, Suratul Ikhlas, right? And this part right here says Suratul, and this is Ikhlas, right? Now, we say chapters and verses, but that's not really what they are. It is used for, I guess, for our own convenience, because a surah is not the same thing as a chapter. There is no other book in Arabic that has surah except the Quran. So it's not really chapters. It's just what we say because it sounds easier and it's easier for someone to understand who doesn't understand Arabic. A surah actually means elevation. It means like climbing something. So when you learn surahs, read surahs, it gives you a form of elevation. It raises you to another level than what you are currently. So when you hear something say surah or surah, it is translated as chapters, but it's not really chapters. It's like intervals. And the other thing is, Ikhlas means sincerity. So this is the surah or the chapter, just for you to understand, of sincerity. It is a very, very, very important surah of the Quran. I saw this one comedian who says, his name is Moses the comedian, he was joking about everybody knows this surah, and sometimes people, some Muslims use it to impress non-Muslims. If I say, oh yeah, I know Arabic, and they say, they recite this surah, and then he's like, everybody know that surah. You know, like, some people may take it for granted, but it's very, very important surah. In fact, there was one imam that used to recite this surah in every one of his prayers. And he did it so much that the believers started complaining. This is at the time of the Prophet. He was like, there are other surahs, why does he always use this one? He used it in conjunction with other surahs, but he used this one all the time. And they asked him to change, and he was like, no, I love it. I love this surah. I'm not changing. I'm going to use it all the time. So they went to the Prophet and said, complaining, can you ask this man to say another surah? Right? He said, the Prophet Muhammad said, he loves this surah. This is a surah that is beloved by Allah. It's a surah that will get you into paradise. I'm not telling him to change it. If you love it, you can say it every time. Right? That's how important it was, and that's why he continued to say it. Now, we also have to remember that the first surah of the Quran, Al-Fatiha, the first surah that we all recite in our prayers, is also one that is repeated over and over again. If you say all 5 prayers, you said it at least 17 times a day. So these are surahs that are supposed to be repeated. But the more that you know, the more you can use different surahs that affect you on a personal level, surahs that you like a lot. If you like, there's some surahs I like the way they sound. There's some surahs I like the meaning of them. So I learned those so I can put those into my salah. But that's what surah means. It means an elevation, right? And Ikhlas means sincerity. And just for a reminder, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Bismillah means with the name of Allah, not in the name of Allah. And I was telling you last week or a couple of weeks ago, almost all the translations of the Quran say in the name of. But that's not what the Quranic dictionary says. It's supposed to be with the name of, meaning whatever you do it with the name of Allah. You use Allah as He helps steer you into what you are doing. He's with you in all of your thoughts and all of your deeds and all of your actions. So it's not just in the name of Allah. They are translated in the name of Allah, at least in my humble opinion, because it sounds like in the name of Jesus. They're doing some competition with Christianity when it really should be with the name of. And this is exactly what the Quranic dictionary reads. I brought the Quranic dictionary a couple of weeks ago just to read it out there and show you that's what it says. So it's with the name of Allah, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. This Rahman, Rahim has the same root. Both of them mean mercy, but they're different aspects of mercy. And as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, also Rahmah means the womb of a woman. That's also a mercy. So they also have this R, this H, and this M. So Suratul Ikhlas, it means the chapter of Ikhlas, or chapter al-Ikhlas, chapter of the sincerity. And then I'm going to just recite it because I'm sure you've all heard it before. Qul hu Allahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. So when you hear this, and I'm sure you're oftentimes familiar with it, I want you to think about what those words mean when you hear them. So the first word is qul. Qul means to say. I was talking to my youngest son. I'm trying to teach him a bit of Arabic now, and I was telling him about the first words that were revealed in the Quran. You all know the first words that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam received? Iqra. Iqra means to read or recite what you hear. So you can read it or recite it. If you're reading it, you can Iqra, or you're reciting it. So what the Prophet understood finally after the third answer was that he was supposed to recite it because there's nothing there for him to read. And the Quran comes from this root, the same root as Iqra, Qara'a. The Quran is a recitation. It's the recitation. That's why you're supposed to say it. You're supposed to recite it, not just read it. But this word is cool. It means to say. And this is very important because all of the revelation was given directly to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam from the angel. The angel is telling him to say these words, right? So it's not just something that he is conjuring up in his own mind, but the angel is telling him to say this. And this came in response. This is the other thing. It came in response to some circumstances that was happening around him. And the angel is telling him to say these words. And this is the words he's going to say after that. So the circumstances around it, all of the Quran came in that way, by the way. That's why when you read the Quran, it's different segments. When you read it, you realize that this part is connected to this part because there was different situations in which the revelation was given to the Prophet and he is expressing himself about whatever the question was. When we say Insha'Allah, it means with the will of Allah. What happened was somebody asked him a question. He said, I'll tell you tomorrow. And then the revelation did not come. And then he waited a week and the revelation didn't come. He was embarrassed. He was like, I told him tomorrow, and now it's a week. And then it was 2 weeks, and then it was 3 weeks. And then the revelation came. Allah said, don't say what you're going to do tomorrow without saying Insha'Allah, without saying Allah as Allah wills, because I might not give it to you. It's not up to you to decide. It's up to me, right? So we say that to say that everything that is happening, everything in the Quran is because of a certain situation or circumstance, and his words is in response to it or explaining it. So what was happening was the people who believed in multiple gods, the mushriks, that mushrik means associating partners with Allah. The group of people that believed in multiple gods, the 360 gods, asked him, what is the lineage for God? How, what was his father like, and his grandfather, and his great-grandfather like? So this surah is in response to it. The angel says, say this, right? So he says, say, Kul huwa. Huwa means he is, and we know Allah. Actually, when it says Allahu, that means he again. He is ahad. I'll put one and only. Right? So this is in response to what they're asking him. They said, tell us about the lineage of Allah. Right? And they believe in multiple gods. So they think God has a father and a son and children and grandchildren and grandparents and great-grandparents. So the prophet is clarifying this by saying he is the one and only, and ahad means one and only. There's another word, ahad is one and only. Wahid means one, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But this ahad is specifically used because it ain't nothing, nothing comes after him. He is completely unique. Ahad, there's no 2, 3 after that. So if you want to use wahid, so this is ahad. The other word is when you're counting, you say wahid. That's wahid, itnain, thalatha, when you're counting 1, 2, 3. But this word means that's it. There's no before, after him, he's the only one. So that's why this word is used. So it's say he is Allah, the one and only. He is the one and only. And then the next ayah says, and so what Allah is doing here through the prophet is explaining his nature and who he is. He goes on to say, Allah, who means he is as-Samad. And this is the only time as-Samad is used. This is the attribute or the description of Allah, which is also his name. I want to make sure that's clear, because when I say attribute, people sometimes think that that's not one of the names of Allah. Allah is one of his names, Rahman is one of his names, Rahim is one of his names, and as-Samad is one of his names. And you can call, and when you're praying to Allah, when you're making a dua, and you say, Allah help me, you can say, as-Samad, help me, right? It means the eternal, the absolute. Meaning he had no beginning and no ending. He's still answering this question that they asked about his lineage. He's the eternal, the absolute. He had no beginning, he had no ending. He's always been here, always going to be here. So he's still answering that question about his lineage. He's just clarifying it even more. So when you hear Qul hu Allahu ahad, Allahu samad, you know that Allah is answering this question about people's misunderstanding about him. And this again is the only time in the Quran that this is used. He is the eternal, he's forever. And then it goes on to say, Lam, it's like, we say La ilaha illallah. La and Lam, they're a negation, they mean the same thing. So it's no or not. It has no father, and Wa is and then there's another Lam, he has no son, or no children. Actually, children probably be the better explanation here. So when it says Lam Yalid by Lam Yulad, it's saying he had no parents. So I'll put parents as well, because when it says father, it means father or mother. All of those are included. So there's no mother of God. In the Catholic catechism, Mary is called a mother of God. So that's why I want to make sure it says parents, so it covers all bases. He has no mother, he has no father, he has no sons, he has no daughters. So again, this is asking about the lineage. The people asked him about the lineage of God. God has no lineage. There was no parents before him, and there's no children that he has after that. So Allah is saying, the angel told him to say this, Qul hu Allahu ahad. Say he is Allah, he is the one and only. He is the Allah, the eternal absolute, right? He has no parents and he has no children. And then the last part of that is, I'm sorry, did you take a picture of that? I have it recorded here, so I can take more pictures of it. That's how I take pictures of the brother taking the shahada. But I just wanted to add this other part. I need a bigger board. Walam, so again, it's and no again. And no. So it's and no. This is the word for be. So it's and no. He is not like, it's like or similar to or comparable to anyone. That's the last part of it. That's all encompassing. So Allah, so in response to it, it says He is Allah, the one and only, Allah, the eternal absolute. He has no parents and He has no children, and nothing is like Him or comparable to Him at all. So someone asked the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said, if you know these 4 ayahs, you know 1/3 of the entire Quran. That's how important these 4 verses are. Because it's so important, because it's the touchstone. It's the understanding of who God is. When you use these 4 ayahs, you can erase all other aspects of misunderstandings about God. Because most people on this earth believe God is a man or an animal or a monkey or a statue or something like that. These 4 verses, these 4 ayahs, I didn't mention ayahs as well. Ayahs, we say verses. It's not really verses. It is, ayah means a sign. Like it's almost like a sign you see on the road. A sign that's a stop sign means you should stop. When you see these ayahs, these 4 ayahs, they are signals for you to do something. They're indications for you to learn something. So these 4 ayahs here in this surah are telling you about God. And if you use those, almost no other religion stands up immediately, because only one religion holds God in that esteem all the time. You see, most religions, they believe in one God. They believe that He is all powerful, all eternal, that He does all these powerful things. But when you get to it, there are some elements that say, well, maybe sometimes, one time He had a son, or one time He wasn't eternal, one time He didn't know something, one time He ate food. And then to cover all of it is this last ayah. Nothing is comparable to Him. So whatever you imagine, that's not Allah. That's to cover all the bases. So we said He's eternal, we said He's the one and only. Hopefully that's clear for you. You understand there's nothing else like Him. But then I'm going to also let you know He had no beginning, He had no end, He has no grandfather, He has no grandchildren. He has no children at all, and He is not the son of anyone. And then to cover all the rest of the bases, there's nothing like Him. So, living brother, good to see you. There is nothing like Him. Anything you can imagine is not like Him. That's the reason why these 4 ayahs are so beautiful. Why the Imam kept repeating them over and over, and they're easy to remember. This is one of the first surahs people learn, because it's easy to remember. It rhymes, it's short. But the potency of what it says is the more important part. Now, let me tell you that the Arabs, when they heard this, I want to add this part, just because we all African Americans here, right? And I just thought about something, and I know that I know you probably do the same thing. Whenever I think of Arabs, I don't think of us. And when I said that, I had to pause, because they look like all of us. All of them, right? So I want to make sure that's a point, because the Muslims, the Masjid way of Salam, will be ahead of all the other people, because they don't know it all. They're closing their eyes to this fact, but it is a fact that they all look like us. So when the other Arabs who was looking like us, and the Prophet was looking like us, and the Sahaba, all of them were looking like us, talking to each other, you put that image in your mind whenever I say the Arabs, right? And change it from what you thought before. Because I know when we thought before about Bilal, we thought about, okay, he's the one that looks like us, and everybody else looked different. It's not the case. So they look darker than me and you, by the way. we would be an oddity. They would be questioning us. Like, oh, yeah, what's going on with y'all? Y'all got brown eyes with all this, right? Well, you doing all light skin in here? You know, you in the desert. You know what I mean? So But anyway, when the Arabs, I forgot what I was going to say now because I thought that point was so important. When the Arabs, what was I talking about?
The oneness of Allah, the profoundness of it.
Right, the profoundness.
What it mean?
I can't remember what I was going to say about that because I can't go past that point without us remembering that. I was thinking about the Arabs talking to him and asking him questions about the oneness of Allah. But I can't remember where I was going with it. Sorry about that. It'll probably come to me while we're talking. But they were around him asking him these questions, asking him about the oneness of Allah, because this is what I was thinking about, is that they all believe in multiple gods. They believe in 360 gods, right? So they're asking him these questions about the lineage of God, whether God has grandparents, great-grandparents, a father, a mother, a son, and all these things. And he's using this to correct it, to clarify their points to them. And all the people around him, they are also a bit upset about this. Because I have to also reiterate this point. When we say La ilaha illallah, it is provocative. It should be. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was saying this to people who did not believe La ilaha illallah. It means there is no God except the God. And they believed in 360. Right? So when he's telling them that, they're a little bit like, hold on, man, what about my gods? That's why they're asking him these questions. He's like, I'm sorry, that's not true. And then he used this to say, this is why it's not true. So Allah is using him to help clarify the problems or the misunderstandings that they had and bring them back to the Abrahamic understanding of one true God. So that's why these 4 ayats are so important. And when you hear them, think about that. Think about the backstory and why it was told and why it is important today. When you say this translation of these words in English, you get more of an understanding. When you say there is no God, say first, that is so important to me. These are the Qul ayats, right? There are 4 of them. All 4 of them begin with the word Qul. Qul means to say, meaning the angel told him to say these words. So they are in direct response to people asking questions. You say he is Allah, the one and only. He is the eternal absolute. He begets not, nor is he begotten. Those are provocative words. Because there are over 2 billion people who believe that he was begotten. Right? So the same thing is true with La ilaha illallah. All of these words, if we say them in Arabic, people don't know what we're saying, what they're saying. La ilaha illallah doesn't sound provocative, except it sounds foreign to people. But when you say there's no God but the one God, they kind of understand what you're saying. You're like, oh, you're trying to tell me Allah is the only God and my God not the right God. Yes. That's what we said, right? It's unfortunate that you may take offense to it, but that's what happens with the truth. Truth hurled at falsehood knocks out its brains, right? This is what Allah says. Hurled at falsehood, it destroys it. So what happens to people who've been knocked out, who their brains been knocked out? They're a little bit foggy. They may act a little bit irritable. They may be upset when you tell them the truth, but you got to tell them the truth. And that's what the prophet did. When it says say, he is telling them what the true answer is, despite what they were thinking previously. So he's bringing them back to their original fitra, their original nature, their natural pattern and natural state of believing in one God. Because they believed in Allah. That's why it's also provocative when we say La ilaha illallah. They believed in Allah. They just believed in 360 gods with him. That's why mushrik was so important, or associating partners with God was so important, and why it was so needed to be cleared up, because they believed all these other gods were with him. That he had children, he had a son, he had a daughter, and he had parents. But when you misunderstand God and the nature of God, you misunderstand the lawgiver, then you start misunderstanding the laws. If you are in America and the president is Joe Biden, but you following the rules of Vladimir Putin, you're going to be violating the laws of Joe Biden, right? The same thing is true in religion. If you believe in multiple gods and you start worshiping them, start following their rules, you're going to be at some point in conflict with the rules of Allah. That's why the belief in one God is so important. That's why La ilaha illallah is the most important thing, because you got to get the person who's the rule giver right first, and then you understand the rules. Yes, sir.
You know, in saying our God is the right or whatever, it's not but one. So even their God is,
Right.
is one and only.
It's our God. Their God is our God.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
You know, so even for us, they take the same stand that they're taking. You know,
You're right. You should word it in the correct way. That the God means everybody's God. It's including your God. Your gods are submissive. I'm not going to say your gods, because the reason that is important is because in other people's religions, they have different gods. They have gods of the world. They have gods of war. They have gods of other things. So Allah is clarifying they're not God. There's no such thing as little gods in Islam. There's no such thing as demigods or half gods or half men, because that's why Allah says La ilaha illallah. Like in the Bible, Moses is called God. He said, "You are a God to the Pharaoh." Satan is called the God of this world. But that's not what Islam says. There's no God of this world. There's no God of war. There's no God of right. There's one God of everything. And the reason that we have to make sure that is important is because African Americans love Egypt, or Kemet, right? Kemet their gods initially came from monotheism. They came from one God. And then they worship individually the attributes of Allah. It's like let's for example, if Muslims started worshiping Allah separately from Rahim and Rahman, and we say, okay, Rahman is one God, we're going to just pray to him. And then if we want love, then we'll pray to Al-Wadud. That means the all-loving. And then if we want fertility, then we'll pray to this God. But all of them is Allah, it's just different descriptions of him. And that's the reason why it's important to make sure that you say there is no God but Allah. You can give him different names, but it's still the one God. So I do take your point of saying our God, because I'm actually listening to the Bible right now. I have it on Audible. And in the book of Deuteronomy, over 300 times it says our God and my God, as if he's not everybody else's God. So the other interesting point, however, though, is that I see this other trend is that people are understanding that Allah is the God, and that Jesus, Moses, Abraham, everybody who spoke Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic, any of the Semitic languages call Allah Allah. So they're seeing that it's all one and the same. There's a movie called The Passion of Christ. It's actually spoken in Aramaic, and then they have the subtitles at the bottom. Well, Jesus calls Allah Allah in that movie. In fact, Arabic-speaking people that speak Arabic fluently are able to follow the movie, because Aramaic and Arabic are so close. And when he says Allah Allah, clearly they pronounce it. They say Allah. They add another A to the end of it. But Allah, Al Elohim, all of those words have the same root. They mean the same thing in all those Semitic languages. And he literally called Allah Allah. Literally, his language is Aramaic, and that's what he called God. So hopefully it's a trend on social media. So the people that are on social media are starting to get this understanding. But like you said, if you speaking English to people, speaking to English to regular everyday people, you want to say Allah is the God instead of saying our God. Because if you say our God, it sounds like we got a different one from everyone else. Any questions? All right. Again, I just wanted to make sure that because this surah is very, very important, and oftentimes people learn this first. And if you can, try to think about the meaning of those words. So when you hear me say it in the khutbah, when you hear somebody say it, because wherever you go, people say it because they love it. You know, I'm in Mecca and Medina, people say that because of the meaning of it and the potency of it. And it is the touchstone. Like I said, if you know that, it is equivalent to 1/3 of the Quran. which means 1/3 of the Quran's purpose was to correct people's misunderstanding about God. You know, when the Prophet was first giving dawah, teaching the Muslims or the Meccans about Islam, it was using these last surahs. And what he was saying to them was, your God is one, and there will be a hereafter. He didn't talk to them about stop drinking, stop smoking, and stop gambling, and stop doing all those things until they established a community. The first thing that they needed to realize is God is one, and that whatever you do in this life, you'll be held accountable for. So he told them about the oneness of Allah and the last day. And he didn't break down all these other things to them. This is the most important parts that you need to know. Because once you get God right, you start getting the other stuff coming into line. People start focusing on, once you realize God, you realize the existence of God, and then you realize that He's going to hold you accountable, then you come to the Imam, you come to the Mashiach, what I got to do, because I know this last day is coming. That's why he was trying to put it in the forefront of people's minds. When you say the last day, to us, we've heard it enough, I guess, so it resonates with us like it should. But to some people, the people out in the public, you say, God is one. There is a God that exists, and there's a last day. It makes you have to think about, there's going to be an end to this. I remember I was telling my wife one time about the end of the world, right? And she was like, taken aback by him, because nobody really wants to think about the end, you know what I mean? Like, the end. I said, but just think about it this way. The sun is in rotation, right? Which means it started to rotate. Think about a top. You spin it, it's going to spin, but eventually it's going to stop. You know what I mean? So all of this entire universe and everything in it has a starting point. It's going to have an ending point. So when you tell people this, it resonates with them. Hopefully, that's the point of this book, by the way. That's why Allah says this Quran is for those people who have taqwa, those people who already have regard for God. Because if you don't, you can say whatever. You can say the last day to them, you can say whatever to them, it doesn't resonate because they don't even think about God. They're not concerned with God. So the first thing they need to do is have some reverence for God. And then you tell them about the last day. And tell them that you're going to be held accountable for these things you do. This life is not an accident. It's not a coincidence. It's not for sport. The reason that we are living this life is because we're going to be tested for the things that we do. And that's what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was telling them over and over and over again. And if they ask a question, obviously he had to clarify it. And that's why this surah came into fruition. And so, well, tell me about this God. Tell me what's going on with him? So when you read the Quran, you know Allah is talking about His oneness and His nature. Then it's talking about the last day and all of those things that warn you, and glad tidings. That's what this Quran is. It's glad tidings for those people who have God consciousness. This book, you should be happy when you read it, because you're going to be in paradise, and that's all it talks about. You're going to be in paradise with milk and honey, with your family and the righteous people, and you're going to only hear righteous talk. But those people not doing right, you're going to be in a lot of pain. And the Quran talks about this explicitly, because it's steering you towards paradise and saying you do not want to go down this way. And then the other third part of it is your community life, what you're supposed to be doing once we build a community, how you can live a righteous life, and the steps you take to repeatedly remember God. Any questions? All right. I think that was all that I had. Yes.
On the 22nd, I was going to take the Shahada, but I decided I want to take it today.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. So we're going to do this today. All right. So,
is it raining?
Is it raining? It's probably going to rain now. It's going to be pouring down rain.
That's why it stopped raining.
Right, it stopped raining. Alhamdulillah. So,
I'd be surprised.
So you want to give her the Shahada?
Is that what you said?
No, I said he's surprised.
Oh, he's surprised. Yeah. But I'm saying that you want me to do it? Okay, all right. So repeat after me. And you are doing this on your own will, your own recognizance, and you understand what this means, everything means. So I'm going to say, Ashahadu illa ha illallah. Ashahadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Allahu Akbar.
Oh my God.
Allahu Akbar.
She said, I think it's
See, it's a
I can
great
see him
day.
smile like that. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Again, I'm always humble when people take the Shahadatain. And I always remember what the brother said. Any person, as soon as they take it, they're already elevated because they are completely sinless. This is, and then I want you to remember this. When I say this, it's not something that should concern you because, like I said, you got so many other ways to remain this way, to remain sinless. These 10 days, what we are doing, trying to fast and pray and do all these things, because if you do that, you get back to being cleansed. If you ask Allah for forgiveness sincerely, you can get back to being the same way she is, right? The same way, the same clean slate that she has right now. The reason we go to Ummah, the reason we go from Jummah to Jummah, so our sins can be forgiven. Whatever show you watch, the music you listen to, or whatever you've done wrong, Allah gives you the opportunity, ample opportunity. Every time we're breathing, every second, right now when I'm talking to you, Allah is giving me an opportunity to say, you know what you did yesterday when you was doing that? Ask me for forgiveness. If you are sincere, you will be forgiven. That's the most empowering thing you can have. Is Allah says, this is in your hands. Your salvation is in your hands, and your damnation is in your hands. And Allah gives you the reward of whatever your work is. The same word is used for reward is your punishment. He uses the same word, meaning whatever you work for, that's what you're going to get. So if you work for righteousness, you're going to get paradise. If you work for wickedness, there's hellfire waiting for you. Fueled by men and stone. So it's waiting for you, right? But Allah gives you this power, because we have this qadr as well. Allah has the ultimate qadr, He has the ultimate power, but He gives us this limited ability to change our fate. We have every moment, this sister right here changed her fate today. Alhamdulillah. And then Allah knew she was a Muslim already. All she did was say the words today, right? Because what Al-Islam does, which is so great, is that it just elevates you. You're already a good person when you come here. People who take the Shahadatain are not evil people. They generally are really good people. They want to take it so they can go from here to here. That's what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was. He was the best person in Mecca, in Medina, in Arabia, period, in the world. That's why Allah picked him. He was already the best person before he got the revelation. The revelation just elevated him. And that's what it just did for you and each one of us. The reason we chose Al-Islam is because we're already good people. We already have taqwa. We already have regard for God. And when you do that and then you add to it, it just makes it better. So what she is doing is getting stations in paradise. That's the reason paradise has ranks. That's the reason Allah says you can have mansions and God is all what He is saying is that you can elevate your status and your station. The more righteousness you do. And that's the ultimate goal too, is that sometimes people criticize Islam because it says, well, you do good, are you doing good because you want a reward or because you want paradise? Abu Bakr, Umar, what's the other Sahaba? Uthman, all of them, and several other Sahaba, they were promised paradise. Just imagine this, Bilal promised paradise. So everything he did after that was just icing on the cake. So what's happening then is you doing it as your own nature to be good. You're not doing it for reward anymore. Allah says you guarantee paradise, by the way. If you believe and do righteous deed, we guaranteed it. So whatever you're doing now after that, it's just icing on the cake. You're just doing good because you're a good person now. And that's what Allah does it for, because He gets no reward from it. That's why Allah put on this earth as Khalifa, as successors. We are the people who are the vice regents on this earth to use the power that He gave us to do as much good as possible. And what happens after you realize you guarantee paradise is you're just a good person. You do good for the sake of doing good. Alhamdulillah. Yes.
He was talking about the Umrah and the amount for that. Have they got to where they setting like a deadline, if not a midway deadline, or like asking for half of the money down at a certain point, and you know, in the end with the person that turned their money in, is they letting that person know what they need to do to get ready, meaning the passport and the shots and, you know.
So for that one in DC, they are, but they have it set for November already. They haven't had a set deadline for the one in spring because they don't have a date for it yet. So there's one that they are doing in November. Let me give you just. So it's November 17th to November 26th, and they have the deadline set already for those, but I didn't mention it because I figured people wanted to go to the one in the spring. But if people are interested in the one in November, I can give you the details for that. In fact, I was incorrect. It's $2,995, a little $5 under $3,000 for the quad, for the four. So if you wanted to do double, just two sisters or two brothers, it's $3,295. Let me write that down. So you can go for a little under $3,000 right now, and that'll be with 4 people in the room. And
Well, I mean, if it's just 5,000 under, you need, you know, I'm suggesting you need to just say $3,000 for that one.
Right. So so for the quads, four, I would say 4 people per room, so people understand when it says quad, what they're talking about. That's the $3,000 one. And then triple, so 3 people is this is that. And then if you want just 2 people in the room, you can specify you and your wife or you and your husband, because me and my wife did that, and that's keep going up. They got $295. So it's 3 to be for doubles. And if you ask them, you can have a single bedroom, but it's gonna cost you a lot more because the whole purpose of it is a pilgrimage. So they want to accommodate 4 or more people, and that's for November. And I believe the deadline for that, I don't know if they gave it to us, but it's coming up soon that you have to have half of it. But I didn't get the date because I was assuming people was going to go to the spring one altogether, because the whole point of it was to give people almost a year or close to a year to save money for it. But if you're interested in going in November one, I can get the details for you, yes.
And what does that cover?
That covers, let me see if it has everything. Okay. The package includes, so there's departure from DC to Medina on November 17th, and you return from Jeddah to DC on November 26th. 5-star accommodations with daily breakfast, buffets, 3 days in Medina, 4 days in Mecca. The package includes round-trip airfare, all transportation in private air-conditioned buses, sightseeing in Mecca and Medina, complimentary ihram, which is the covering that the men have. They'll give you that for free, and the Umrah visa processing service and staff assisted available 24/7. So I guess you can call them with any other questions. And I'll put the number on here as well. What is required of you is 6 months valid passport with 4 empty pages. 2 passport size front face photos with white background and permanent resident. Please submit color copies of both sides green card, an extra $600 processing fee, I guess if you have a green card. So the phone number for this is 330-488. So that's what's happening in November. The spring one hasn't been dated yet, so they don't have any times on when you need to bring the money in. But if you have any questions, that number right there you can call, or you can email them as well. But you can call that number to get their information, to get any questions answered for you. What I would like for is if anybody wants to go, if they're able to go in the spring, I wanted them to go, especially because Sister Jackie was talking about going. I told her, listen, because she was apprehensive. I said, listen, I will push you around everywhere we need to go. The Umrahs, the actual process for the Umrah only takes about 3 hours, maybe 4 hours if you got to stop in the middle to use the bathroom. But it doesn't take that long. So most of the time in there, you are praying, worshiping, sightseeing, you can go shopping and all those things. But that's all the other time is really you just enjoying Mecca and Medina. But the actual Umrah only takes about 3 hours. I think we did it in 3 hours. I did it twice because what happens is you go and make your intentions on the way to Mecca, and then you can you make your intention. So you say, I'm going to make Umrah for myself, or you want to make it for someone else, right? So you see when you make, I'm saying I'm going to make my intentions for myself. Then I go make the Umrah. Right after that, you can go to, it's called Aisha's Masjid. It's her mosque. It's about 20 minutes away. You go back there because you got to wash and do everything all over again and say, I make my intentions to do Umrah for, because I did Umrah for a sister here that I knew wasn't going to be able to physically make it there. So I said, I'll make Umrah for her. I named who the person was, and then I want to make Umrah for her. And it took 2.5 hours, maybe 3 hours to do the whole thing. Because you do it with a group. So what happens is you circumambulate the Kaaba 3 times, you make the prayer, and then you do the going back and forth of hanging 7 times. And each time you're praying in between those, in all it'll take about 2.5, maybe 3 hours to do. So you're there, so that's 3 hours, right? And you're there for 4 days in Mecca and 3 days in Medina. So you go into the Prophet's Mosque. They have museums and things you can go to, and all kinds of places you can go eat. When I first went there, I was so excited, I guess, about being over there. I exchanged a bunch of money, more money than I needed, right? And because your dollar, it may change by the time you get there. Your $1 is about, last time I went there, it was equal $3.22. Right? So I think maybe $1,000 to spend, right? And it was just me there, and I'm like, I don't know, I'm gonna spend $1,000. So that's really over $3,000 for one person, right? So, and everything there is negotiable. Now, I didn't realize that when I first went there. One of the brothers from Atlanta, he was like, look, man, they told you that price is $100. It's not $100. That's just a recommended cost, especially since you're American, right? So everybody's asking everybody where you're from. So they found out once you start talking to them, oh, you speak English. They're from America. They was like, okay, it's $100 for you, right? Because a lot of people that come there are from really poor countries, but they know Americans have more money. They know their money is like this, so they're like, oh, they got more money, so we'll sell them as $50. But the people next door are selling the exact same thing, and you can say $20, and they're like, oh, okay, $20 or $15 or whatever. So I did that, and I bought a bunch of souvenirs for my family members. I had to buy another suitcase for all the stuff I bought. And I still had, at the end of it, I still had to change my money over because I couldn't spend $3,000 of it. So I changed it back to American dollars. I kept a couple dollars just for souvenirs. And the same thing happened this time. I knew better. I was with my wife. I thought maybe she's going to buy a bunch of stuff, but both of us bought what we wanted, and we still had to change the money over because we didn't spend that much money there. First of all, when you get there, everybody there is worshiping Allah. So that's mostly what you are doing. When you're hungry, you eat, you use the bathroom, but other than that, you're praying. There are people, and when people find out you're going to Umrah, they find out you're going, so they say, well, pray for me so I can get this. Somebody asked me to pray for a husband for me. Pray for her, whatever, right? So everybody's asking for you to pray for them, and that's what you're doing. Because this is maybe the only time you'll ever make it to this Kaaba. So every chance I got, I was praying, right? And fortunately for me, this time I had Jummah at the Kaaba. And it was going to rain. I got a picture of it. The clouds are so gray. I'm like, I don't care if it rain on me. This might be the only time I'm doing it. So, well, I'm going to do it with pneumonia. But I'll be all right. So fortunately for me, I was able to do it because they have changed the rules a bit too since the last time we were there. So when we were there before, you could wear whatever you want to for the men. You remember that? We got the black dashiki on.
Said the day of the Yeah, I mean, yeah.
For the actual Umrah, you have to wear the
The
towel,
garb.
right? But after that, we was going to pray whenever we wanted to, wearing whatever we wanted to. That's not the case anymore because so many people come. You have to be in Ihram. So I had to get my towels and stuff washed again so I can go back. And I wasn't doing Umrah anymore. I just wanted to be praying by the Kaaba. But the sisters, y'all fine. You can go there a million times in a row. Don't worry about that. You gonna have to you have to wear a towel again to go back in there. Because when you go in there wearing this or wearing whatever, they're like, hold on, you got to go upstairs. So everybody can pray, but you can't pray down on the Kaaba unless the men are in Ihram. So you got to wear a towel. Because we went there, every time we prayed, we went back to touch the stone and all of that stuff. You got to be in Ihram when you do it now. But the sisters, y'all go, you'll be perfectly. You can go there more times than he can. He can go, but he got to be upstairs. And when you're upstairs, you can't see the Kaaba. And on the second or third floor, we were able to go to the top floor where you can see down, but they were doing some construction on it the last time I went, and they're doing so much work there that it may have changed. By the time we make it there again, it may change again. But at this point, it's so many people going, and so many people accepting Islam. It officially hit 2 billion people a month or two ago, and that's considering all the wars that's going on in the different countries and all the lack of dawah. If we actually gave dawah, more people would be Muslim. We don't tell them about this thing. I just saw this lady who was a white American. I think she's from America. She might have been from Britain. She may have been a nun. She was saying that she asked God for guidance and for clarity. She said she asked him 3 days in a row. And then on the third day, her daughter came to her door wearing hijab. And she told her about Islam. And she said, this is what her sister said. She said, why didn't anybody tell me about this before? That's what she said. She may be in her 70s, 80s. She said, why nobody ever told me about this deen before? Saying, basically, if somebody would have told me, I would have been a Muslim a long time ago. There's this brother named Bilal who does spoken word. He said the same thing. He said, why didn't they teach me about the religion of Islam in the first place? Like, why you don't just tell me this? I would have been a Muslim. Right? So it's on us to tell people. There are people out there who are muttaqin, who have taqwa, who have God consciousness. They just don't have the direction. That's what we're supposed to be given them. Allah says there are Christians who are mu'min, who are believers. They just don't know. They just don't know.
And like you was pointing out, for baggage and stuff, along with people that's real serious on going, they need to pack light, but leave room for
To add other stuff.
for the add stuff, because just the garb alone almost take up a whole suitcase.
Right. Well, they have it flattened now, so it's easier.
It's a little bit thinner.
It's they have it packaged, so actually they carried them. They brought them to us and gave them to us this time. Imam Suleiman gave it to us when we were preparing for it. So we went to Medina first, and then we went to Mecca. We had a big dinner, and then he gave it to us then. But
But it's something you have to, if you want to keep, you could leave it in the hotel. But I'm saying more likely you want to bring it back. But I'm saying that's extra right there.
Yeah.
Not long when you went out and get buying souvenirs. You need to allow for extra room, along with your packing light to go,
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking, the first time I went, I was toiling in my brain, like, what am I going to wear? This is, the first time going, I'm nervous. The second time I went there was much easier. And inshallah, alhamdulillah, we have people who've made Hajj, who've made before, so we can kind of tell you what to expect, because I had no idea what to expect at all. So I brought way too many clothes. You know what I mean? I'm like, I'm going to change 3 times because of this, and it's going to be hot. I had to wear a jacket on sometimes, So it wasn't as hot as I thought it was going to be, and especially if you go when I went in December, it was cold. So what you think, you should suspend all of your prejudices, because it's not like what you think. It wasn't like what I thought. In fact, to be honest with you, I probably would not have gone if Brother Kareem didn't go and some other people I knew, because I was like, oh man, what are you going to, people be worried about what I'm praying or what I'm doing or all that. my own prejudices that were non-existent when I got there. It literally was. So, so this time I brought sweatpants and t-shirts, and I knew I was gonna buy a couple of those. So I was like, I packed much more lightly this time, even though we went for a longer time. Last time we went, I think I told you it was like 5 or 6 days. This time it was like almost 10. But alhamdulillah. This is the other thing I want to tell you all about it, because it seems like you all have some interest in it. It is said that the best communities have the most hajis. So the more people in a community that make hajj and make umrah, for whatever reason, their communities thrive more. And we know what that reason is. You get more conviction, you have more taqwa when you actually see the Kaaba and you see the people around, and you realize that what's happening here is a bigger picture. It's a larger picture. And you get the connection with all the brothers and sisters in the world who pray like you and pray and have the same aspirations that you have. It makes things different. That's the reason why we have the Eids. And that's the reason why I take my kids to places where a bunch of Muslims are. Like, listen, it's not just us in here. It's all over the world. And when you go to Mecca and Medina and every single person there believes like you, it's a feeling that you can't duplicate. My most solace moment was driving to Mecca. When we was driving there on that bus, and I was like, man, this is where I've been praying through my whole life. I'm about to make it here. You know what I mean? Like, I'm headed right in this direction. And then when I got there, it was like, alhamdulillah. And this time, the second time I went was even better because it was not nighttime. So I saw all of the things on the road. Because another misconception, and I still had it, brother, after our Umrah, is I was assuming when you think of desert, I was thinking about the Sahara and sand everywhere. It's not like that at all. It's almost all mountainous. Almost all mountainous. All you saw was mountains everywhere you look. And the reason I saw it this time is because we just happened to be traveling during the daytime. So I'm like, look at all of this stuff. And then they have so many places that are being developed. But in between those is just nothing but mountains. So you think about the Prophet, when they're traveling on those camels, they're traveling through these mountains, the mountains that they were having battle and stuff on. The reason they was fighting on these mountains, and the reason the Prophet was in that mountain is because the place is so mountainous. There's mountains everywhere. We also went to the mountain where Abu Bakr and the Prophet was hiding. I didn't make it in there yet because they haven't made the trail to go up there yet, and I told my wife we're only going to one mountain. So I couldn't go to this one, right? I promised her one mountain. And then the hills are really small. You can go on the hills. Because when we got on the hill, she said, you told me about this hill wasn't nothing. Because it's relatively small, but the mountain is really high. But most of the place is mountainous. It, again, changed my prejudices, my preconceived ideas of what Mecca was going to be like, including with the women. The reason I went without my wife is because I was like, man, this is going to be bad for sisters here. They just started being able to drive. So if something happened with my wife, man, we're gonna have a fit in here, right? So I went and I realized that none of those things I thought was true. So that's when I went with her the second time, and she loved it because it was exactly like I described it to her. But before I went, I was like, I was concerned that somebody's gonna say something crazy to her, or do something crazy, and it was nothing like that.
And then, like you're saying, by thinking it's something one way or another, like my wildest sci-fi, you would think, wow, you got to travel between the hills and back and forth, what you call it. It's in a mall. I mean, it's a mall setting. It's no different than being in the mall. What my father sci-fi.
Because they have
fans and
stuff
and tile. I mean, everything over there is marble.
Right.
The walkway, the sidewalks, inside of what's called, everything is marble. So inside what my wild sci-fi, it's no different. It look no different than a mall. So you ain't out in the heat. So it's
made to accommodate the pilgrims. It's made to accommodate people that are coming. So you are running between mountains, but you don't have to run. Obviously, you can walk, and it's on, like you said, it's all on marble, and you can take breaks in between your Umrah. You can do all of that. It is really designed for that many people to come there. So it's accommodating for you, definitely. So when you hear those things, that's why I was trying to tell Sister Jackie, like, don't be concerned with it. First, I'll push you around with it. People in wheelchairs, there are other people that are waiting to push them because they want them blessings. Yeah, I had to push somebody to Sapphire Mall. So not only did I receive blessings for it, but I helped her do it as well. I helped her complete it. But it's you'll definitely be able to do it, and it's a very surreal experience. The last time we went, when I went with Brother Suleiman, and I got a picture of him like this, because it was 60 of us this time. So he's standing at one of the mountains, and he got his black fist up like this. I'm like proud as I don't know what, because it's, we got the black power sign up here, it was a fun time. It was really, really, that picture, I think he put it on his page, because it just looked like something that's supposed to go somewhere for everybody to see. But he's like, everybody, because what happened is you go from one mountain to the next, so we wanted to do it all in a group, so he'll get together, because it's literally thousands of people around, so he got to put his fist up, and there's other people in the group with you, so everybody else stay together. So everybody came around him, and then we go to the next spot and put his fist up, everybody come in, but it was a really good experience. And I, inshallah, I want everybody to be able to go. What I had said previously is that I want us to be able to sponsor somebody to go, start doing that at some point. So everybody in the community will have a possibility of making it there. If they recite some verses of the Quran, and they do something, and we say, listen, that person, we should do our best to try to facilitate that person going. And then if maybe they had a spouse, that they can pay for their spouse, but we can pay for at least that person to make it to Umrah. And try to do that each year, because once I heard talking about those people who make the pilgrimage, those communities are much stronger. I can see why you are not the same person when you come back from there. You know what you're praying to, and you know all the people that are in unison with you, and it's life changing. I mean, you all heard about Malcolm X and how it changed his whole philosophy on white people and black people and everybody, because it really is like that. You see people. Everybody there is excited to see you, and you're excited to see them. It's really, really, truly a life-changing experience.
He's saying how easy it is, and I expect it don't hurt. Maybe do some walking, ahead of time, because like doing anything, the more you get yourself prepared for it, it just make it easy for you. But it ain't like I did that. I'm just throwing it out. Anything you do to prepare for, but it's like you say, it's
anything you prepare for, it'll make it easier for sure. So if you know you're going, I would start walking, because you're going to be walking in some places. You have to travel, you have to walk in, but most of the time the bus will take you as close as possible. My wife and I were training to go up that mountain, so really that's the most strenuous thing, and most people didn't do it. The younger people went up the mountain this time, but most of the older people did. But one guy walked up there, he had Timberlands on, man. I'm like, this dude got Timberlands walking up a mountain. But there are smaller hills that we all went on. Like we went on the Mount Uhud, where one of the battles were fought, and that's it's really easy to climb up. We went up to Mount Arafat. Everybody was able to climb up there. So you'll be able to go to the small, they're really not mountains, they're hills. So if you can go on Mount Trashmore, you can go on almost all the mountains there. All the hills there. But there are a few that are really high. One in particular, before you even get to the mountain, you got to go up this steep hill. But other than that, you're walking. If you walk around in the neighborhood or something, you'll be able to do it, no question. And if you're not able to do it, something happens, you get tired, you can stop. You can rest. You can go home. You can go back to your hotel and rest for a little bit and come back and continue it. As long as you stay in the state of Ihram, meaning that you stay in the state where you're clean and you don't do anything to break your Ihram. You go down and go sleep. It's like breaking your wudu. You know what I mean? Not breaking your wudu. I wouldn't say that, because you may pass gas. You still can do Ihram. You still can do Umrah. But if you have relations with your wife, then you out of it. You know what I mean? So as long as you stay in the state, you're good. So you can go home and rest for an hour or 2 hours or whatever, and then come back and complete it. Because I think there was one brother who had to stop because he had to go take his medication, and we came back in there. Another brother, this time he had to use the bathroom, so he went to use the bathroom. We met back up with him and his wife, and we finished it. So, you also got to cut your hair. You ready for that? I found out I don't look too bad with a bald head. Walaikum salam.
Being that we're gonna make it, right?
Mhm.
So you still would have to make your Hajj still too?
So Hajj is different. But Allah says in the Quran about Umrah and Hajj, He says, prescribed for you is Umrah and Hajj. He says that specifically. But when you make the Hajj, it includes the Umrah. So if you make the Umrah, you still have to make the Hajj. It's still not, it doesn't fulfill your Hajj obligation. The reason I'm promoting this is because Hajj is so expensive now. It's expensive, so expensive that it's about $10,000 to $12,000. And unless something very fortunate happened to me, I'm not going to pay $12,000 to do it. I can't afford it. Yeah, and so that's just in thinking. 2 people is $24,000. You get a lesser. The Umrah is lesser, obviously, like the lesser Eid. It's less people there. If you go during the end of Ramadan, it's about 2 million people there, and that's the closest you can get to Hajj. But Hajj is longer. The Hajj is longer. It's a little bit more extensive. Excuse me, and that's why it's a little bit more expensive. And you stay outside more often. You stay in tents. It's a little bit more rigorous in order to do the Hajj, and it costs. It's actually went up tremendously in how much it costs. I don't foresee it going down anytime soon, unfortunately. So that's the reason why I recommended Umrah. They say if you do, something is considered Hajj if you do it, maybe 2 Umrahs or something like that. I can't remember right off the top of my head. But I would say most people are going to be struggling to do the Umrah. So if you save money, obviously you can save enough to do the Hajj, and I know people, saved a long time to do that. So you can do, if you prefer to do the Hajj, and you would, I don't know how long it would take for you. You may be able to do it, sooner than other people. But I know the general African American community. I just looked up the median income. It's $46,000. So they're not able to pay 1/4 of their income for a Hajj. You know what I mean? So Umrah is probably the closest thing that they'll ever get to it. And Allah Ta'ala knows our circumstances. He knows our ability. That's why Hajj is if you are physically and financially able to do so. And $12,000 is a lot of money in any form of fashion. Unless you're a millionaire. But especially for our community. That's $46,000 per household. African Americans in America, the median income is $46,400. That's not considering the food you got to pay for yourself and clothing and your house, because housing is going up as well. So I would assume that most African Americans are unable to pay $12,000. And when you save that amount of money, something else comes up in the meantime. Your car breaks down. Anything happens. That's a large amount of money. It's a huge sacrifice, but we as Muslims make sacrifices. But what I am suggesting is making the Umrah because more people will be able to. And then it's like stages. The reason I'm telling you about this Arabic is because I want you to get a little bit familiar with it, get more familiar with it, and then your kids will be better with it. So if we make Umrah, then our kids will make Hajj. You see, what we're all doing right here, all of us, we are answers to the prayers of those African slaves that were kidnapped and brought here. They were saying, I want to keep this deen, something that was taken from them. Hopefully my grandkids will keep it. Hopefully my great-grandkids will keep it. The other thing is, they had this thing called the point of no return in Ghana, in these places in Western Africa. That's the other thing I want to do. I want to go back and fulfill those prayers of my ancestors. I know they were saying, I want to go back to Africa. They couldn't make it back. Maybe we can, even if it's just a visit. So the least we can do is try to make Umrah. So that's the reason why I set it as a goal that many of us many of us could attain. The same thing was with, I was telling you about the attempt to get the laws changed for our children. Someone said, well, let's ask them to have our kids off for Jummah. If we can't get them on for Eid, we can't get Juma every week. So it's kind of stages and steps to this thing. So if we can come here, we can come for the Eid, maybe many of us can make it to Umrah. And then one or two of us, some people already made Hajj. One or two of us can make it to Hajj. Because what happens is, we are people of example. That's why our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah says he's the example for us. When we see somebody else has done it, then we're like, okay, maybe I can do that. Maybe I can strive for that. So the more people we can get to go to Umrah, a lot of people start going to Umrah, and then we'll get one or two people that can afford Hajj. Then some people will like, you know what? I got a bonus. I'll use that money to save towards Hajj. And then you do it that way. Or you get if you get a raise, you say, okay, I've been living on $500. Now I got $550. I keep all my $50, put that in another account for my Hajj. So some people can do it that way. But my vision was try to get as many people, especially on this, because we got at least 20 people now, right, going to Umrah, and some people had no inclination of going at all, so I wanted to inspire them. Maybe they'll go. Because listen, if I go, this will be my third time now, and it'll be because people I know went. You know what I mean? Like, it's one thing for me to go and make Hajj, but it's another thing for if I can get the community or some people from the community to go to Umrah, I'm going to Umrah. And I know Allah knows my intention. He knows my intention is for all of us to have a great experience and to understand it, because we have limited representation of African Americans in Mecca and Medina. And we need more representation. And the reason is because we don't have that much money. This is in America, the richest country in the nation. We make $46,000. So it means around the world, it's even less than that. You know, you would assume that more Africans are making Umrah. It's not the case. It's not as many as I thought. That's another misconception I had. I figured they're right here by Mecca. I figured I'm gonna see a bunch of Africans. I saw far less Africans than I anticipated. I saw far more Asians than I anticipated. They were able to afford it. So us African Americans, if we have the ability to, I'm saying make Umrah. If you can make Hajj, I'm an imam. It's impossible for me to tell you not to try to make Hajj if you can, right? It's one of the 5 pillars. But if you can't afford it, if you think about your finances and whether you want to put $12,000 to it or you want to put $3,000 to it, it's a big difference, you know. And that's just you. Because if I made Hajj, I'll probably put my family back a little bit, but only I'm making it. My wife might. We can afford $24,000 for sure. So it's our finances, you know, and how they, you know, how it all comes out. All right, y'all. Assalamu alaikum. I think my wife.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Can't do what I'm eating. Yeah, I'm sure I did. Yeah, and that was at 1:30.
Good.
I'm jumping. All right.
I'm gonna try to make it.
Inshallah.
Next year.
For what time?
9 o'clock.
I got to